Welcome to Mountains Made Low, where we help you encounter the love of God and live well in the modern world. I'm Christine Reagan.
And I'm Dennis Mueller.
So what just happened, Dennis?
We have a new pope. So I know this episode is probably going to drop next Thursday, which will be a week.
We'll have had a pope for a week.
Yeah, we'll have had a pope for a week. So this is old news for some, but
for us, it's very new.
Very
it's
new,
what,
yeah. It just
3-4 hours old.
Happened within the last 4.5 hours, or 2.5 hours if you're on Christine time.
I didn't realize how late in the day it was already.
Yeah. So it's exciting. Cardinal Robert Prevost, Pope Leo the 14th. The fact that he took Leo the 14th, it's going to be.
The fact that he's an American is
so
the
much.
most shocking thing.
There's a lot of good stuff.
You could have knocked me out. I thought, what?
Yeah.
Really? They did it? I never thought in a million years they'd. And nobody did. You'd see an American, maybe it was like a token American on a list.
I think Vegas gave him 5% odds.
Did they?
Yeah,
Ooh.
I think that's what it was.
Man, I wish I had played.
I know.
But
right?
But it's very exciting, and it's nice to know that it's not even just nice to know. We have a Holy Father again.
Yes.
And we need a Holy Father. And Peter lives, and his office is alive and is going to get back to work.
And the church goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
more will unfold about this Pope. I'm sure by the time you hear this podcast, you're listening to it, you'll have everything that you wanted to know and more.
Oh, yeah. They're already doing deep dives into his life and his priesthood and his legacy and his...
Psychologically analyzing him, and they're going to predict everything that he's going to do.
Yeah, everything he's not going to do.
Don't listen to any of it. Don't listen to any of it.
But you made a good point that when he came out on the balcony today, he looked like he was getting choked up.
Yeah,
and
he got very emotional.
If you're the kind of person that waits for a good cry, this is when to have it. This is when you want the emotion to take over, because then if it doesn't happen, and everybody responds in their own way, but the gravity of the position, the gravity of the office should be. You should feel it.
And most people are unaware, but when a man is elected pope and he agrees canonically to the results of that election and agrees to become the pope, they whisk him away to the room of tears. And it's not really for tears of joy, yay, I'm the pope. It's really the weight of the world is now on his shoulders as he leads the church. It's one thing to lead a parish, it's another to lead a diocese. This man is leading the entire universal church throughout the entire world. And it's a tremendous responsibility. Yeah, and it does. And it was so wonderful to see him kind of get emotional there on the balcony.
I got emotional watching it. I got a little choked up.
Got a little verklempt.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, I love a good cry.
Right. But it's, again, I think it was edifying to see him because you could see that he really understood
I love that he said, with you, I'm a Christian. For you, I'm a bishop. I think that was part of his opening address.
Yeah.
And it's not I reign over you, I am with you.
Yeah.
I am for you.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus did.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to, once we get done here today, to take a look at the translation of his speech so I can enjoy exactly what he said. I picked up a little bit of it.
Yeah. More to come on Pope Leo the 14th. So I want you to know, real quick, before we get into anything else, that yesterday my son's school did a Mother's Day little snack and hangout. I don't really know how to describe it because enough food wasn't served to really call it a brunch or a breakfast, and we didn't do enough to really call it an event. But you spent time with your kid for like 45 minutes in their classroom, and you played a little game. But the game that they had us play, kids do. It's called a booklet, where it's like a Quizzo game, but it's on their little computers.
A book?
It's called it's strange. It's not booklet. It's like
BLOOKET.
And they get a question, and then I didn't realize that you have to answer the questions, but the faster you answer them, the more points you get.
Okay.
And the topic was the Blessed Mother. The topic was Mary.
Cool.
So I'm sitting there, the religion teacher in the room with all the other kids and all the other moms and some grandmoms and aunts and everybody. And
Were you crushing it?
I'm like, Andrew, like this is it, kid. Like I am
We're
made for this. And so Team Star Fox, which is what we were, Team Star Fox won with 236 points, first place. And at one point, like I was kind of giving him answers a little bit.
So you can do trivia.
So I can do Marian trivia on a second grade level, like no lights out, absolute lights out. And once some of the other moms realized, oh, who's Team Star Fox? I was like, it's us. And they're like, of course it is. It's fixed. And I'm like, listen, let me have my moment. But once I realized that it was timed and that, well, we got it right. Why are we in 5th place? It's because I was letting him hit the computer. I was like, Andrew, get out of here. I got
Oh
this.
my
Like, I need to
gosh.
be so reactive. And he was like, go, Mom, go, Mom. Go. It was great. And I'm like, make sure you tell Dennis Mueller about this.
Well,
It
if
was
we
very
ever
cool.
do a sequel to our trivia event, make sure you bring him.
Yeah. Or just maybe I'll ask Tom to add more Mary questions. Really get in her wheelhouse. It's appropriate because today we wanted to talk about motherhood and we wanted to talk about the Blessed Mother. It's the month of May. May is traditionally dedicated to our Mother Mary. This formal dedication has been around
It's a long
at
time.
least since the 18th century as like officially existing. But I mean, it has roots and it goes all the way back to medieval times as well. It originated in Rome, but it soon spread throughout the church and throughout the world. And it's called Mary's Month. And parishes have had May processions with their parishioners, especially school children get involved with this. And then it often culminates in the crowning of Mary.
Yeah. Mary gets 2 months. I mean, she gets May and pretty much all of October, the month
Yeah.
of the Rosary. So there are all these focal points that are dedicated to Mary, both in the springtime and then again in the fall. May processions have been around for such a long time, and so
I couldn't
many.
even find a clear origin for it. Everybody kind of claims it.
And there's all these beautiful traditions, and Mary's honored by many of her titles. One of her greatest titles that she's honored under is Mary, Queen of Heaven and Earth. And this whole feast of the Queenship of Mary used to be celebrated back on, I think it was May 31st, but it was later moved to August. But this practice of placing this crown upon her head really helps us to foster reverence and devotion.
I'm
to
assuming,
Mary.
I couldn't find this, but I'm assuming that the Feast of the Queenship of Mary is why maybe we started crowning Mary in May.
It's possible,
That's-
yeah. John Paul II talked about how, and here's a quote from him. He says, "The queen symbol was attributed to Mary because she was a perfect follower of Christ, who is the absolute crown of creation. She is the mother of the Son of God, who is the Messianic King." This is, again, Mary is the disciple of disciples. She's the par excellence,
Yeah.
the saint of saints. And so it's really Mary's role in God's plan of salvation that really exalts her over all other creation, over the angels, over the saints, over creation itself.
Yeah, and just the idea of historically having a mother of the king was a role that it didn't have the same authority, it didn't have the same power as the king, but the mother of the king always had a very influential role, a very important role
Yeah.
in terms of counsel and intercession. And you see that in Mary's life. You see that in how Mary relates to us as well.
Yeah, it was Pope Pius XII who really established the feast of the Queenship of Mary. And he encouraged devotion to Mary, and he has a nice little quote, too, for Mary. And he said, "Let all, therefore, try to approach with greater trust the throne of grace and mercy of our Queen and Mother, and beg for strength in adversity, light in darkness, consolation in sorrow. Above all, let them strive to free themselves from the slavery of sin and offer an unceasing homage filled with filial loyalty to their queenly mother." One of the things that we as Catholics really need to do a better job of is edifying our Protestant brothers and sisters about this relationship that we have with Mary and her role in the church, because we're often accused as deifying Mary and worshiping Mary alongside God. And that's simply not the case. That's simply not what we do. We venerate Mary. Mary is, and we venerate her more than the angels, the saints, and everybody else because of this incredible role that she has as Queen of Heaven and Earth, as the Mother of God. She deserves that. She's honored, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
And the May processions do that. So as Catholics, we honor Mary as our mother, but it's also important to note that really this isn't something new. In ancient cultures, they've celebrated the motherhood of women in the month of May for centuries because of its connection to recreation and rebirth, springtime and new life. So regardless of any type of religious affiliation, women and mothers have always been understood to be life givers.
Yeah.
Right? That's their role. That's the natural role that they have.
You
And
never thought that would be a controversial statement, but it is.
it
in
is
the culture
today. Yeah, we're going to get into that in
there.
a little bit. But Mary, as our Blessed Mother, is the one who gives life to the one who gives life to the whole world.
Yeah. That's the story of salvation.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
It's
And she
beautiful.
takes on this role of a mother directly and without hesitation. And that's what her Fia is all about. That's
Yeah.
why she's so beautiful. She's courted by God in this extraordinary way. And she says, yes, I will become a mother. She does it courageously. She does it voluntarily. And she's the model for all women. She's the model for all mothers. I would also say she's the model for the church. And in that way,
Oh, yeah.
men and women.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, men and women make up the church together.
Right.
And the church is in a spousal relationship to Jesus. So there's something about being the spouse of Christ that even men have to understand
Yeah.
in their own way, in the context of being a member of the church.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that, when you kind of make that connection, as men being spouses, because we're a part of this bridegroom relationship with us and Jesus, I think if you look at Paul's words where he turns around and he talks about how the women be obedient to your husbands. Well, that's my role as being part of the bride of Christ, being a member of the church. I'm expected to be obedient to my spouse, who is Christ Jesus. Right? And there's obedience. And we hear that time and time again. What does Jesus say? What do we hear God's voice say, I should say, when Jesus is baptized or in the Transfiguration? Listen to him. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. Right?
And in the culture, people get so caught up on, what is it to be masculine and feminine? And I think they're really important conversations.
Yeah.
But I'm like, can we talk about being a Christian first? Because that's something that we both have in common. And then you can say, well, this is how a Catholic man should operate. And this is how a Catholic woman should be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how should a Catholic?
Yeah.
But let's give the attention that motherhood deserves today. And motherhood is in decline. So many women today turn away from motherhood. And there's a lot of ways in which women can live out this maternal call and this maternal instinct. But specifically, women are turning away from biological motherhood. But again, having said that, I think all women have this capacity to be life-giving. I think it's just built into how you're made. Women, regardless of whether they biologically have procreated, they have this incredible ability to make things and the people around them grow. It's what John Paul II called the feminine genius, which is a word that's almost become cliche in the church, but it is so, so true.
Yeah.
And in that way, all women are mother. And that's an absolutely indispensable role in the world.
This idea of motherhood really isn't something that's supported in our culture today. And we hear messages all the time like, why live your life for another person when you can live life for yourself?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're in this
you're missing out in some
Yeah, we're
way.
in the culture of me, and having a baby is an inconvenience. I mean, you hear that same language with the abortion talk.
Yes.
That this is an inconvenience. I don't want it. I'm not ready for this. This is going to interfere with my career, and that's just a small sampling. There's a lot of reasons why women do that.
Somebody won one of the best actresses got the Academy Award a couple years ago, and in her acceptance speech, she drew attention to the fact that she had had an abortion and how that abortion allowed her to win that Academy Award and to fulfill her dream and to fulfill her purpose. And I thought, what is happening? What is going on? And everybody just cheered. That's the problem with the culture.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
Yeah.
And so when you say it's not supported, it's not. People stand up and cheer when you don't give life. Yeah.
But that's the thing. One of the first things that you have to realize when you become a parent is that your life really isn't about you anymore. You begin to live your life for someone else.
And that's not an easy thing. I think that can...
It's not an easy thing, but it's the essence of love.
So true.
Right? I mean, this is it. I mean, when you love someone, you begin to live your life for that person. As Christians, we're called to love God with our whole heart, our whole mind, our whole soul, and we begin to live our life for God, for the love of God. And it's the same thing with parenthood. If I'm being called to parenthood, then I'm going to begin to live my life for this child and
make sure that they thrive and they figure out what they're good at. No, I mean it's daunting that you have to care for another, and they are entirely reliant on you, especially when they're young.
There's a fear there, I think, for everybody who's a new parent. I mean, I just remember experiencing that myself. as a new parent, and I am sure that our lady felt that way too.
Yeah.
As excited, she trusts Mary, but I'm sure that there was just this natural fear of like, ooh, what's life going to be like?
Right.
How this is going to be different, and the magnitude of carrying the Son of God, which
When
is why
I
she ponders.
when I was pregnant with my son, I was living in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, which is where Catherine Drexel was, and her shrine was there. Have I told this story before?
I don't know. Maybe to
Okay.
me, but I don't think.
So her tomb was there in the crypt, and I would go on Wednesdays after I was done teaching, and I would sit there, and I would go frequently at a time when I knew nobody would be there. So most of the time I was there alone. Maybe one or two people were there, but I was getting bigger and bigger, and I was more and more terrified each day. Now I have three. It's I know what to expect now, but back then I'm like, how am I going to do this? I was so anxious and I was so afraid, and I would go up to Catherine Drexel's tomb, wait for everybody to leave, and I would put my hand on her tomb, and then I would kneel. There was one day where I knelt in front of her tomb, and I just moved my head forward, and my head just laid on her tomb, and I felt so connected. No, and I wasn't. Nobody was there. Nobody saw this, but I'm like, I need the intercessory prayer of Catherine Drexel. Of course, I was praying the Rosary at the same time, but I'm like, this is what it is to prepare to be a mother.
Yeah.
I'm at this point where I'm seeking, the divine assistance, because you don't know what's coming. Nothing can prepare you.
Sure.
And so I thought, gosh, if I have a saint in my backyard, I'm going to go sit with her, and we're going to put our heads together, and we're going to figure this out. That was the thought process. That's what it takes to be a mother. And I think I felt the healthy fear of, you want to be prepared as much as you can and prepare in the right way. But our culture devalues motherhood, and sometimes women, they don't even know where to go to get the support that they need. They look at people who choose to be mothers, and sometimes they feel as though they have not been liberated in some way. Haven't you heard the good news that you don't have to be a mother, or that this is something that is antiquated? And this became very apparent last month. It was early April when there was a very popular pop singer named Chappell Roan. I do not think it's her real name. I think it's her stage name. But she went on a very popular podcast, and the podcast that I think is trending the most with young women. And she made comments about motherhood. And in my estimation, she is perfectly expressing the cultural tone towards motherhood. So this is what Chappell said. Chappell said, I think Chappell's 20... She's 24, 25, 26. She's somewhere in her early to mid-20s.
Okay.
She said, all of my friends who have kids are in hell. I actually don't know anyone who's happy and has children at this age. I literally have not met anyone who's happy, who has light in their eyes. This got reactions from everybody,
I can imagine.
But think about this, the cultural, what a commentary on motherhood. Motherhood is hell. Motherhood's hell. And imagine young women hearing that too.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that she didn't know her audience. This podcast clip was everywhere, and it's been viewed millions of times. It went viral, like the kids like to say. And because of this, a lot of people responded, people in the secular world, people in the political arena, people in the church. Many people made kind of a response to Chappell and her general assessment of motherhood.
Pros and cons?
Yeah, because here's the thing. I'm not even blaming her for what she said. I'm not here to shame her for her comments. Maybe that really has been her experience. Maybe that really has been what her friends have experienced.
Well, it's not her experience. She's not a mother.
No, but in what she's witnessed in the
Right.
life of her friends. If that's her lived experience just by viewing it from the outside. But I think it's important to address it in some way, because Chappell, I think, gave voice to what the culture already thinks about motherhood.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and you can feel free to disagree with me here,
I will.
but I don't necessarily know that I agree with that. And the reason
I don't either.
No. I mean, I don't agree that what you said, that that she's giving voice to a culture that already thinks that motherhood is something that I'm not so sure I buy into that. There is a trend to downplay motherhood, but like when she talks about these women, I have never, and I'm older than her. I'm twice her age probably. Yeah. I have never encountered
very old.
Yeah,
very old,
ancient, 1 foot in the grave almost. I have never encountered a woman who felt that way, who was a mother. Have you?
I have not heard it expressed like that, person to person. I'm talking about I think she is representing what the culture thinks about motherhood.
That's what that's what I disagree.
Okay.
I think that her niche of culture thinks that way, because
I don't think it's so niche.
let me give me a chance to explain. Who is she running with?
Well,
Right?
yeah, she's
not
in Hollywood.
Right. She's not running with us. So again, when you get used to that type of a lifestyle, yeah,
Yeah, but most people aren't running with us.
right. And that's why I think that when we talk about this cultural movement, I don't think that it's as big as we think it is. I believe that voice is a minority voice, but it's an influential voice, and I think it's going to have an impact on young women who are in their 20s and their teens that are being programmed with this message.
I think it's a minority in the sense that most women become mothers. And I think if you were to poll, people say, no, I mean, this is hard, but it's worth doing. It's deeply meaningful. It gives me joy.
Yeah. When you get into certain areas like the Hollywood clientele, like again, this woman who was, who was with the Academy Awards and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. For them, it is hell because it interferes with what they want in life. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe it would even trend into corporate America with women who are just fixated on their career and establishing themselves, and so maybe that mentality creeps in there. But I really do think for the majority of women, I don't necessarily know I don't necessarily know that they would feel that way. But the messaging is not being controlled by those women. The messaging is being controlled by these other women who have a platform.
And when especially these young girls listen to Chapel, they're like, gosh, well, why would I idolize this person so much? Why would I make a choice to live in hell? She's already telling it. I seem to trust her. I'm a fan. Why would I choose that kind of a lifestyle? So I actually don't think that we disagree, but I think the way the culture is trending is more and more in Chapel's favor every day.
Oh, I agree. As these young people that are hearing this message, I think there's going to be a cultural shift unless something is done to address that and help them to see the beauty of motherhood.
So going back to what Chapel said, so maybe that is her experience. I do think that she is wrong. Being a mother myself, I think she's wrong. But I think what's more important about her statement is how a life of sacrifice is viewed in society and how the sacrifice of motherhood is misunderstood and it's diminished. And I also know that there's a direct correlation between the sentiment that Chapel expressed and the pervasive pro-choice and pro-abortion culture that we have, especially in this country, but also the world. I don't particularly immerse myself in pop culture, but I do like to keep tabs on what's going on just so I can talk about, I try to be all things to all men.
So you can seem trendy.
I could always enter a conversation, make a couple comments, and then immediately leave because I'm like, well, I've hit my
threshold.
my threshold.
That's it. I don't know
nothing
anything
more to
beyond
offer.
that.
So I need to find another fresh conversation where I can add another little two bits of information. But I frequently read on these news outlets, there's a story about a woman, again, often a celebrity, commenting on her decision not to have children, and it's treated like, oh, you've decided to finally
liberated yourself.
You've thought for yourself.
Yeah,
You're out of the system of societal oppression. Hooray for you! I mean, there's really a celebration. And then in the comments, people are like, yes, 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 Queen. Oh, wonderful. You speak for us. What I see is that the modern world wants to strip women of their call to motherhood. And when I say that, I'm not even speaking biologically necessarily, although I think that's fundamental to the conversation, because the vast majority of women do have biological children. And please don't misunderstand me. I don't think that all women have to have children. I think God calls women to live out this call to motherhood in different ways.
Sure.
Maybe it's being a spiritual mother to someone that you pray for. Maybe it's being a foster mother. Maybe it's being involved in ministry in a specific way. Maybe it's just being a friend or a neighbor. If you are loving the people around you, and you're a woman, you are being a mother in some way.
That's a good point, yeah.
And you never grow out of that. So it's not just like, oh, once I've hit menopause, I'm no longer a mother. No.
Yeah.
This stays with you as you are a woman until, in heaven, right? We're in heaven one day, body and soul. And so our motherhood and our femininity is going to matter in eternal life as well.
Yeah. But that comes back again to that whole idea. Again, this is all rooted in love.
Yeah.
So even though it might be burdensome and it might be, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? This idea of living your life for another person, that's what love's all about.
And I would think that women, as they age and even get into old age, this gift of motherhood should become more mature and more virtuous.
Yeah.
you should get better in some way with age with that, because that's how the spiritual life should be working.
Like a fine wine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I describe myself. As you keep saying how old I get, I'm like wine, Christine, like wine. Don't give in to despair. But when I talk about like being a mother, I'm not talking about stereotypes, because sometimes people are like, oh, I have a friend who likes to mother other people, and what they're really saying is she likes to be bossy. That's not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about motherhood. Every woman lives out motherhood in their own unique way. If you've ever met a woman, you know that no two women are alike. So you really can't stereotype women.
No.
Women are as diverse as they come. And you just need to open your eyes to see that.
You're speaking to another problem in society that I think is what women are reacting to in terms of this liberation that they're looking for, is because they have been stereotyped for so long.
I think about this too. I think about, where does this ability to live out a maternal call come from? I think it comes from the fact that ideally, and I know that this is not everyone's situation and that things happen, but ideally all women have a womb. And I think that having this space inside of you that has a capacity to create life comes with physical and spiritual gifts. We're always called to live out the gifts that we're given. Womanhood and motherhood, it's not a result of the patriarchy. It's a result of God's plan. Who gave you these gifts?
Yeah.
Who gave you this capacity to be life-giving? Right? Whether you use it or not, whether you actually biologically give birth or not, you have a space inside of you that is reserved for growing love. You don't think that's going to translate into every element and every aspect of your life?
Yeah.
Translate into all of your relationships? And the world needs that. That is indispensable to the world. But I see this stripping away of a woman's general vocation to be life-giving. Their fruitfulness simply made known by their presence in the world. We enrich the world through our femininity. However that's uniquely expressed, again, going to find itself in all sorts of diverse ways. Women uniquely care for people, and specifically the souls around them, and entrusted to them. Young school teachers who are like in their early 20s in elementary school, many of them are not biological mothers themselves, or at least not mothers yet. In their role as serving as educators, they bring elements of motherhood into their classroom all the time. And I think children recognize that. And that's why children often, especially young children, might accidentally call their teacher mom. And for the kid, there's almost nothing more embarrassing. You're like, I hope she didn't hear that.
Have any of your college students ever called you mom?
No. They call me lots of other things.
How about mother?
But you know what they call me? Some of them apparently are on a text chain. And I found out that in the text chain, they call me Reg Dog.
Red dog?
Reg Dog, like Reagan, my last name.
Oh,
like
Reg
DAWG.
Reg
Reg
Dog.
Dog.
Oh.
And so, like, if somebody was going to be late for class, they would text somebody in the class and say, "Tell Reg Dog I'm running late." And I'm like, Reg Dog? They've never done this to my face.
Right.
Out of respect. But I'm like, I don't know if I should be proud or insulted, or I'm fine with it.
That's a
actually.
gangster
It's funny.
name.
Yeah, like Reg Dog. All right, I'll take it.
She's a hard teacher, but she's cool. Reg dog.
But there's something that's happening in that classroom. Go back to that example. There's something about what's happening in the classroom that is reminiscent to them of maybe their own mother, perhaps. And I think that's just what women bring to the table all the time, every day, as they live out their own call. They do their own daily tasks.
I think it was, you know who Mother Angelica is, right?
I do know who Mother Angelica is. Mother Angelica was hilarious. She's so funny. I mean, EWTN at its finest. She started it, didn't she?
Yes, yeah.
She did.
Yeah, I believe she did.
She was revolutionary. And I mean, any Catholic media thing you see today, whether it's Robert Barron or Mike Schmitz, there would be none of that had Mother Angelica not done what she did.
You don't think Martin Sheen would have kind of contributed? Martin Sheen. Fulton Sheen.
I mean, The West Wing was a good show, but I don't think that it would have made the impact. No, yes, I think Fulton Sheen, I don't think it just has to be one person who lays the groundwork. But no, I think what Mother Angelica did in terms of a whole station, a whole TV station.
Okay, yeah, I see
Fulton
what you
Sheen
mean.
had a show. He was a celebrity and a presence unto himself.
Right.
And a wonderful teacher. But she was groundbreaking in what she was able to form as a company, as a Catholic company in media.
Yeah.
Wild.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way.
You don't listen to a lot of what I say.
No. So Mother Angelica said this, she was talking about women in general, but it really, I think it speaks to a lot of the different ways that women serve the world in a very maternal way. And she said this. She says, "What is a woman? She brings life new life, she's like Jesus. She is a go-between. She's an advocate. She is a friend. She is that warm love you need to grow. She's a mortar between all the brick that make up your family. They make you a house, a home. She saves you from a lot of trouble. She's an intercessor. She worries about you, constantly prays that you don't goof off and lose your soul.
And I'm not saying that other people don't do that as well. Men do this, fathers do this, but they don't do it like women do it. And the way in which a woman has been designed to be a woman is something that the family needs, the culture needs, the church needs, the world needs. But motherhood's hard. It's a sacrificial life, as is fatherhood, but it's sacrifice for love of another. It's the call of the Christian life. It's to will the good of another. Being a mother is about being a self-gift. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
That's a good thing, and the world needs it. And so when we just kind of boil it down to, oh, it's hell. Some days are really trying. Some days you might feel like, gosh, nothing went right today. But it doesn't invalidate the mission. It doesn't invalidate the sacrifice. No. Two things can be true at one time. This can be kind of beating me down in the moment.
And wearisome.
And this is the best thing I've ever done. And we can hold those two things and be true.
Yeah. And we do that often. You just think about the hard work that maybe you put into something and how exhausted you are and how much resources you put into it. And you are exhausted. You're tired, you're weary, but at the same time, you're like, man, look at that. That's awesome. It was worth it. I feel like I'm on a Pope quote here. Maybe it's just the day. But John Paul II, he talked about how motherhood really could be this source of joy, but it can also become a source of suffering and sometimes great disappointments. And I think that that's what you were alluding to there. In this case, love becomes a test, often heroic, which costs so much to a mother's heart. And I'm quoting John here. These heroic women do not always find support in the world around them. On the contrary, the culture models frequently promoted and broadcast by the media do not encourage motherhood. In the name of progress and modernity, the values of fidelity, chastity, sacrifice to which a host of Christian wives and mothers have borne and continue to bear outstanding witness. The heroic thing is always worth doing, even though it might be hard, even though it might be weary, even though it might be costly. It's the heroic virtue that wins in the end. And if you have mothered, if anyone here listening is a mother and has mothered, it's contributed to your holiness and you're called to be a saint. This heroic virtue that you have lived through your motherhood has made you holy. I mean, again, we talk about marriage as being a sacrament that is designed for the other person, benefit of the other person. Like my job as a husband is to help my wife grow in holiness. Her job as my spouse, my wife, is to help me to grow in holiness. And if a marriage is blessed with children, then our job as parents is to help them to grow in holiness. And the only way that I can help somebody else to grow in holiness is by becoming holy myself. Right? So there's a beauty here to the family, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Holy Family is the model for all families.
Yeah. We've kind of domesticated Mary tremendously. Yeah. We've made her into, you see these images of Mary, and she's got the blush on. She looks often like, I don't love like fancy versions of Jesus where he looks like he just got a blowout. It's not my kind of thing. But Mary sometimes is depicted as this kind of like porcelain feminine doll in some way. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to talk about Mary as the queen of heaven and earth, because there's nothing delicate about that. Yeah. She is the mother of all the redeemed in the world, and she has an entire army at her beck and call.
Have you ever seen the image of Mary where she's wearing the combat boots?
I haven't.
Yeah.
But I would like to frame it.
Just her role in crushing the head of the serpent, her role in redemption. Mary really is the model of all mothers, and she's queen of heaven and earth. She's not this delicate figure, that, as you said, she's not who's...
Mothers are not delicate.
Yeah, who's fragile and needs to be taken care of. She's full of strength.
What mother would not go into battle for her child? How would you fight for the ones you love? How would you fight for your child today? We have made motherhood into how do you fulfill the physical, and it's so highly spiritual. It's not about what I'm able to give my children. That's important. But being a mother is about how am I helping them grow in holiness?
Right.
How am I loving them? It's not about do they have the latest this? No, it's am I helping you be holy?
That's where the only perfection that matters is the one that Jesus calls us to. Right there in Matthew's gospel, when he says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Perfection is not how we understand it in English. I mean, what he's talking about there in the Greek is this desire to be who God created you to be. Be who God created you to be as God is. Well, who did God create you to be, and how is God? Well, he's holy. He's talking about holiness there. And it's a shame that it's translated that way in terms of perfection, because it's just lost on us. We just kind of roll our eyes. But this is if you want to be a perfect mother, embrace who you are. Strive
How
for
God made you.
holiness. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
God made you. I'm saying that because, like, if you are a slob,
Let's not get personal.
no,
Okay.
well, I'm looking at you.
Did you look at
Reagan.
my car?
I'm looking at you, rag dog.
Right, dog.
If you are, you should never have said that. I'm not going to let that go. But if you're a slob, if you are messy, and then if that's who you are. I mean, I'm not saying to live that way. I mean, you strive for better. But if you begin to compare yourself to everybody else,
Yeah.
you're going to be
miserable. You're miserable.
You're miserable. You're never going to measure up. But that's not how God made you.
Am I a good wife? Am I a good mother? Am I a good homemaker?
Yeah.
Am I a good...
Strive for holiness. That's what God's asking you to do.
And in order to do that, you need to trust God every single day, in any circumstance. All of the solace that we desire has to come from Jesus. We're not going to find it anywhere else. All vocations have to have balance, because the life is about sacrifice. You give so much of yourself away. Well, you have to remember that you can't pour into an empty cup.
Only in God is my soul at rest. My heart is restless until it rests in you, O God. Love can be very long-suffering, but we also hear how love endures all things, and we can endure all things through God, who is love. In love, there is always joy.
And that's what I think the culture, the world, Chapel Roan, I think that's what they're missing. They're seeing...
Because there's no joy in hell.
Perhaps we're just seeing women in the lowest moments, right? And it's never just that. It's this high risk, but very high reward type of a circumstance. And I think that's what the world gets wrong.
The world needs women, and the world needs mothers. And salvation came to the world through the love of a mother, and I think women need more support and prayer to fulfill their God-given vocation. They really need it. So I think any guys that are listening here, any men that are listening to this podcast, pray for your wife. Pray for her. Pray for her. Ask God to give her the strength that she needs to be the mother, to be the spouse that God has called her to, and support her in that role. I mean, that's my job. As a husband, I want to be able to support my wife in that role. I want to be able to help her to succeed. And so we need to pray for all mothers, and not just during the month of May, when it happens to be Mother's Day in this month that's devoted to Mary. We can take time to check in this particular time of the year and to offer words of encouragement and love, and all that stuff is good, but it shouldn't just be limited to 1 month.
Remind mothers that God hasn't asked them to give into all the societal pressure and do it all. All you have to do is what's right in front of you. If you're a mother, or if you're mothering, you have to love the child. You have to love the people who are right in front of you. And you teach them to have a relationship with Jesus, and then offer themselves to God, because they're going to suffer in this world, and they have to be able to bear it. That's what a mother does. A mother helps the child to grow in holiness so that they can bear the things that they will suffer in this world. Ultimately, you want that to culminate in eternal life. This is how we're going to transform the culture into a culture that doesn't want to eliminate life, but wants to embrace life. So my favorite band is For King and Country.
Yeah,
and
we
they
know
made
that.
we do know.
Yeah.
They made a movie last year called Unsung Hero. It was in the movie theaters, and it was kind of the life story of their family and how they had come from Australia. They came to America, and their parents had 7 children, and they had to get by. And it's a story of how they struggled and how they got to where they are today. And there's a line in the movie that is so, so beautiful. One of the characters is talking to the father figure in the movie, and he says, "Your children aren't in the way. Your children are the way." And that's what I think the culture needs to hear. Children are not the problem. I've heard people say that they want to be able to go to a restaurant and not hear children in the restaurant. They don't want to hear children talking. They don't want to hear children crying. And I understand. They want to be able to go to church and not hear children crying. You cannot remove children from society. I understand that things can be egregious and there's times to take time away and that things are not always appropriate in a given moment. But that's what I think that some people want to do. They just want to remove children from the equation. And we were never meant to live that way.
Yeah. When I do parent talks for sacraments at different parishes and communion talk in particular, I do hear from parents, and usually a lot of times it's more moms than the dads, about how they don't go to church because they have young children. Yeah. And it's always sad. And I always tell the parents, I said, God didn't bless you with a child in order that you might be driven away from him. He blessed you with this child in order to help you to experience more fully the love that he has for you and to draw him closer to you. And so the advice that I always give them is the advice that my wife and I did. This is personal advice. When we went to church, we came to church every single Sunday with our kids from when they were a week old in that carrier, and we put them in the same pew. We sat in the same spot week after week. And what I tell those parents is that anybody who has an issue with your kids is going to find someplace else to sit. And you are going to be surrounded by people who just love what is going on in your life, watching the chaos unfold and the MASH unit that is in the pew and walking in and out of the pew and crunching on all the Cheerios and all this other stuff. And I always get a little upset when I hear that.
Well, you hear it because they wouldn't feel this way if they hadn't experienced some level of rejection
because somebody told them
judgment
that they shouldn't be here. Yeah, they shouldn't be here.
Gosh, just zero time for it.
Yeah. Listen to this quote that Fulton Sheen had on how women fulfill a priestly role in their motherhood, specifically their biological motherhood. Okay, so here's his quote. When a mother carries the young life within her through a free act of love, she has a different kind of love from what any man has for a neighbor. Most of us love a non-self or something extrinsic and apart from our inner life. But a mother's love during the time she is a flesh and blood ciborium, I love that image, is not for a non-self, but for one that is her very self. A perfect example of charity and love which hardly perceives a separation. Motherhood then becomes a kind of priesthood. I love that line. She brings God to man by preparing the flesh in which the soul will be implanted. She brings man to God in offering the child back again to the Creator.
So, I mean, that's what and I'm not saying that all women have to be mothers.
Right.
But consider if God is calling you to motherhood, specifically biological motherhood. Because if you're meant to be that, what does he say, flesh and blood ciborium, don't miss it. Don't miss it. I actually grew up in my parents' house. They have a magnet on their fridge, and it just says motherhood. Don't miss it.
Oh,
and I saw that every day growing up. Yeah. I think they still have it on their fridge.
Really?
They probably have the same fridge. So, God does not call everyone to motherhood, but most women are called to be mothers. And I think it's something that your salvation is built into that.
Yeah.
We don't want to diminish that role. We want to support that role. It makes the world holier. It makes children holier. It makes marriages holier.
Yeah.
Love that. Flesh and blood ciborium, right? So we may not be celebrating Mass, but we are living out the priestly call of our baptism.
Absolutely.
In a unique and necessary way.
Yeah.
So, and only women can do that. Only mothers can do that.
Yep.
So I want to hear this more in the world. I want to hear this more in the church. I really do.
It's definitely a message that really has to become a little bit more, much more vocal, because right now, who's controlling the narrative?
The Call Her Daddy podcast.
Yeah.
That's what people are listening day in and day out. This is what they're hearing.
Yeah.
We need to tell them about how they can be living tabernacles.
Right.
When they receive the Eucharist, how by carrying a child, you're a ciborium in your own right.
Yeah.
So.
Beautiful imagery.
Yeah.
Beautiful imagery. But that's the church.
That's the church.
I often hear that the world really laments that women are not ordained to the priesthood in the Catholic faith. We hear that all the time.
We heard it immediately today when a pope was elected. Within like 30 seconds, they're talking about, do you think that this Pope's going to ordain women? And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that didn't take long at all.
Yeah, there's this glass ceiling in the church that is, that's the priesthood, that they just can't break that barrier.
All right. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Happy belated Mother's Day. Say a rosary, call your mothers, talk to your mother, pray to your heavenly mother, the Queen of Heaven and Earth. And we'll see you next week.
All right. God bless.